Have you ever felt like someone no longer values you, no matter how much effort you put in? You show up for them, support them, care for them, yet, over time, it feels like your presence has become an afterthought. At first, you tell yourself it's just a phase, that maybe they're busy or preoccupied. But deep down, you feel it, the slow fading of appreciation, the subtle shift from priority to convenience. So you try harder. You give more. You stay available. You prove your worth, thinking that if you just show them how much you care, they will finally see your value. But here's the truth, the more available you are, the less valuable you become. This isn't just an opinion, it's a psychological reality. People tend to take for granted what is always present. This is known as hedonic adaptation, the idea that when something is constant and predictable, its impact fades. Think about it. When you first get a new phone, you're excited. You admire it, you take care of it. But as time passes, that excitement fades. It's not that the phone lost its value, it's that you've adapted to its presence. The same thing happens in relationships. If you are always available, always saying yes, always putting in effort without reciprocation, people stop appreciating you. Not because you don't matter, but because they've become used to your presence. So, what's the solution? How do you break free from this cycle without resentment or manipulation? That's exactly what we'll explore in this video. We'll uncover why people stop valuing you and the hidden psychology behind it. The simple trick that shifts their perception and restores your worth. The mindset shift that ensures you never have to chase validation again. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about others valuing you, it's about you valuing yourself first. So stay with me until the end, because what we're about to discuss has the power to completely change the way you navigate relationships, self-worth, and the way you show up in the world. Why do people stop valuing what once felt special? Why does appreciation fade, even when you continue giving your best? The answer lies in a psychological principle called hedonic adaptation. It explains why humans naturally adjust to things that are always present, no matter how wonderful they are. Think about the last time you got something new, maybe a new phone, a new car, or even a new relationship. At first, you were excited. You paid attention to every detail, felt grateful for it, and treated it with care. But over time, what once thrilled you became normal. The excitement faded, and it was no longer something special, it was just something there. This is what happens in relationships, friendships, and even in workplaces. People stop valuing what they assume will always be available. Now, let's apply this to real life. Imagine you have a friend who is always there for you, always answering your calls, always supporting you, always putting you first. In the beginning, you might appreciate them. But over time, their presence becomes expected, not special. You don't have to work for their attention, so you stop noticing how much they give. It's not that you don't care, it's that their availability has made their presence feel ordinary. Now, what if that same friend suddenly stopped being so available? What if they weren't always the first to reach out? Instantly, you'd start noticing their absence. You might even wonder, have I taken them for granted? Let's take another example, romantic relationships. In the beginning, couples are excited about each other. But as time passes, one partner might give too much while the other starts to withdraw. The giver becomes predictable, always saying yes, always trying, always available. And the receiver? They slowly start expecting that effort without giving much in return. The same pattern happens in work environments. Employees who always say yes, always stay late, always do more than what's required, often end up being the ones overlooked. Why? Because their extra effort is no longer seen as extra, it's just what they always do. So, what's the common thread here? Predictability lowers perceived value. The more someone expects you to always be there, to always give, to always say yes, the less they consciously appreciate your presence. And here's the harsh truth, when people believe they don't have to work for your time, your energy, or your presence, they stop valuing it. Not out of cruelty, but because human nature tends to focus on what is scarce, not what is abundant. This is why being too available, giving too much, and expecting nothing in return leads to being taken for granted. Not because kindness is wrong, but because unbalanced kindness creates an illusion that your effort is endless and expected. So, what's the solution? How do you shift the dynamic when you start feeling undervalued? The answer isn't to become bitter or play mind games. The answer is to become intentional about your presence, your effort, and your time. And in the next part of this video, I'll share with you a simple but powerful trick that can instantly shift how others perceive your value, not through manipulation, but by setting a natural balance in your relationships. Stay with me, because understanding this could completely transform the way you are treated by those around you. Now that we understand why people stop valuing what is always available, let's talk about the simple but powerful trick to regain your worth, taking a step back. This works because of a psychological principle called the scarcity effect. People naturally place a higher value on things that are less available. When something is always accessible, it's taken for granted. But when something becomes rare, it instantly becomes more desirable. Think about a limited edition product. If a brand announces that only 100 units will ever be sold, people rush to buy it. But if that same product was always available on the shelf, it wouldn't feel as special. Now, apply this to relationships. When you are always the first to call, the first to text, the first to make plans, your presence starts to feel ordinary. Not because you are ordinary, but because you've removed the effort required to keep you in someone's life. So, how do you shift this dynamic? You stop overgiving. You step back. You create space. Here are 3 simple ways to do it. 1. Stop always initiating contact first. If you are always the one reaching out, checking in, making plans, pause. Give the other person a chance to make an effort. If they never do, that tells you everything you need to know about how much they truly value your presence. You don't have to make a dramatic exit. Just stop being the one who always chases the connection. Real relationships are a two-way street. If you stepping back causes complete silence on their end, then perhaps you are holding the entire connection together alone. 2. Don't be the first to respond instantly. When someone messages you, pause before responding. Not to play games, but to break the pattern of instant availability. When people are used to instant responses, they stop appreciating your time. They assume you'll always be there the moment they need you. But what happens when you take a little longer? They start to notice. They start to wonder. They start to realize your time isn't something they can take for granted. And here's the key, the right people won't be upset by this. They will respect your space. The wrong people will complain, manipulate, or guilt-trip you for not being instantly accessible. And that, in itself, will show you who truly values you. 3. Give space instead of trying harder. When you feel someone slipping away, the natural instinct is to try harder. To send longer messages. To plan bigger surprises. To prove your worth. But what if I told you that trying harder is the exact thing pushing them away? The more effort you put into forcing someone to appreciate you, the less they feel the need to value your presence. So instead of filling the space, leave it empty. If they care, they will notice. They will feel your absence. And if they don't, that is your answer. Taking a step back is not about manipulation. It is about restoring balance. It is about protecting your dignity, your energy, and your self-respect. So, ask yourself, are you overgiving in a relationship where your absence wouldn't even be noticed? If so, it's time to take a step back, and watch what happens next. Have you ever noticed how people suddenly pay attention when something they once ignored is about to disappear? It's human nature. We don't truly appreciate the value of something until we're at risk of losing it. This is why people instinctively notice absence more than presence. Think about it, when was the last time you deeply appreciated the air you breathe? Probably never. Because it's always there. But if you were to hold your breath for even a minute, suddenly, every second of oxygen would feel precious. This same principle applies to relationships. When you are always available, always giving, always present, people stop noticing the effort, because it becomes their expectation. But the moment you step back, that's when they feel the shift. And here's why: our brains are wired to respond to scarcity. Absence creates awareness of value. Psychologists have long studied the scarcity principle, the idea that we desire what feels rare, not what feels abundant. When something is limited, it commands attention. A perfect example. Think about an everyday item, let's say a simple glass of water. If you have access to water anytime you want, you don't think twice about it. But if you were stranded in the desert without it, that same glass of water would suddenly become the most valuable thing in the world. Now, apply this to relationships. If you are constantly available, constantly giving, constantly trying, you are that unlimited water source. No one stops to appreciate what they assume will always be there. But when you remove yourself from the equation, something fascinating happens: people start to feel the void. The friend who ignored your efforts suddenly notices the silence. The partner who took your kindness for granted starts wondering why you're distant. The workplace that overlooked your contributions realizes the gap you left behind. This is not about playing games, it's about breaking the cycle of being taken for granted. Why this is not manipulation? Now, some might say, isn't this just emotional manipulation? The answer is no, because the goal here is not to control others, but to restore balance in relationships. Manipulation is about forcing someone to act in a way that benefits you. But stepping back, that's about giving people the space to decide if they truly value you or not. And that's the beauty of it: the right people will notice your absence and appreciate your presence. The wrong people will let you go without a second thought. And either way, you win. Because if someone truly values you, they will recognize your worth. They will make an effort. They will reach out. And if they don't, then stepping back has done something even more important: it has revealed who was never meant to stay. The power of self-respect. At its core, this is not about getting people to chase you, it's about shifting your mindset from seeking validation to standing in self-respect. It's about understanding that your worth is not measured by how much you give to those who refuse to give back. So, ask yourself, who in your life only notices your presence when you step away? And more importantly, do they deserve the space you once gave so freely? So, what happens when you take a step back? When you stop overgiving, stop chasing, and stop making yourself constantly available? There are only two possible outcomes, and both are a win for you. Best case scenario, they realize your worth. The best possible outcome, they notice your absence, and they make an effort to re-engage. When you step back, truly step back, not as a game, but as an act of self-respect, it forces people to confront the value you brought to their life. Maybe they took your kindness for granted, not out of malice, but out of habit. Maybe they assumed you'd always be there because you always were. But now that you've created distance, they feel it. And suddenly, they start reaching out. The friend who rarely checked in before suddenly asks, "Hey, are you okay? I haven't heard from you in a while." The partner who seemed distant now makes an effort to spend more time with you. The people who overlooked you begin to recognize the space you once filled. And that's when you know, they see your worth now. And the best part? They made the choice on their own. You didn't have to beg, chase, or prove anything. But what if the opposite happens? Worst case scenario, they don't care. The other possible outcome? Nothing happens. You step back, and instead of feeling your absence, they continue as if nothing changed. No messages. No effort. No realization. And as painful as this might be, it is actually a gift. Because now you have clarity. You have undeniable proof that they never truly valued you in the first place. And while that truth may hurt, it's far better than living in the illusion that they cared more than they actually did. If someone doesn't notice your absence, what does that say about the role you played in their life? If they don't even ask why you've been distant, was the relationship ever as meaningful as you thought? And if your efforts were met with nothing but silence, were you really receiving anything in return? You see, stepping back is not about testing people, it's about revealing the truth. Why either outcome is a win. Either they recognize your worth and step up, or you finally see who was never meant to stay. There is no losing scenario here. You either gain a stronger, more mutual relationship, or you free yourself from an unbalanced connection that was only draining you. And most importantly, you reclaim your energy, your time, and your self-respect. Because at the end of the day, the people who truly value you will never need to be convinced to make an effort. They will meet you halfway. They will show up. They will choose you, because they want to, not because you had to beg them to. So ask yourself, are you holding on to people who wouldn't even notice if you let go? And if so, is it time to finally step back, and see what happens next? At the core of every relationship, whether friendships, romantic connections, or even professional dynamics, there is one essential foundation that determines how you are treated: self-respect. Because here's the truth, people take cues from you on how to treat you. If you don't value yourself, why should they? If you constantly seek approval, why would they ever feel the need to give it freely? Many of us spend years chasing external validation, believing that if we just prove our worth to others, we will finally feel enough. But in reality, the more we depend on others to affirm us, the more exhausted, anxious, and emotionally drained we become. The trap of external validation. Think about it. If your sense of worth is built on how people treat you, then your confidence is always at risk. If someone is kind, you feel good. If someone is distant, you start questioning yourself. If someone ignores you, you wonder if you did something wrong. And suddenly, your entire emotional state is controlled not by your own beliefs, but by how others respond to you. That is a dangerous way to live, because it puts your happiness in the hands of people who may not even deserve that power. True self-worth comes from within. Real confidence isn't about being liked, needed, or validated by others. It's about knowing your value even when no one is watching. Self-respect means you don't beg for attention, because you know your presence is valuable. You don't overgive to those who don't reciprocate, because you respect your own energy. You don't tolerate being an afterthought, because you know you deserve to be a priority. And the most powerful part? The moment you stop seeking validation, people begin to respect you more. Because now, your worth is no longer dependent on their approval, it's something unshakable, something rooted in your own self-belief. The power of focusing on the right people. When you finally step back from relationships that drain you, you create space for relationships that fulfill you. Instead of trying to convince people to value you, shift your focus toward those who already do. The friend who checks in on you, even when you're quiet. The person who celebrates your wins without feeling the need to compete. The ones who show up not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to. Because these are the relationships that deserve your time, energy, and effort. Final thought, own your worth. At the end of the day, you teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you accept, and what you walk away from. So, ask yourself, are you giving too much to those who give too little? Are you chasing people who wouldn't chase you? Are you valuing yourself enough to set a standard for how others should value you? The moment you start living in your self-worth, not just knowing it, but actually embodying it, your entire world will change. Because the people who truly see your value, they will never need to be convinced to appreciate it. So, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed. We've explored why people stop valuing you, not because you aren't worthy, but because of a psychological principle called hedonic adaptation. When something is always present, it becomes expected rather than appreciated. The more you give, the more predictable you become. And over time, your presence is taken for granted. We've also learned the simple but powerful trick to break this cycle, taking a step back. By reducing your availability, you activate the scarcity effect, making others reevaluate your importance in their life. You don't do this to manipulate or punish, but to restore balance in your relationships. And then, we talked about the possible outcomes. Best case scenario. They realize your worth and make an effort to keep you in their life. Worst case scenario. They don't notice or care, revealing that they never truly valued you in the first place. And while that may hurt, it's also a gift, because now you know where you stand. But beyond all of this, the most important lesson is self-respect. Because at the end of the day, your value is not determined by how much effort you pour into others, it's determined by how much you value yourself. Now, I want you to reflect on something. Have you been undervaluing yourself? Have you been seeking approval from people who never give it? Have you been giving too much, while receiving too little in return? If so, maybe it's time to step back, not to chase attention, but to see who truly values you when you're no longer the one holding the relationship together. Let's continue this conversation. If you found this video helpful, like, share, and subscribe for more self-development and relationship insights. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced being taken for granted? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments below.